Ladies and gentlemen, my name is James Garsbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino. Happy New Year! Hope you all had a really wonderful New Year's Eve. I know I did. I'm actually here in Glen Lyon, which is just outside of Daylesford, with my partner and our dog, Millie. We had a very low-key New Year's Eve. Just had some delicious wine. She made some pizzas, which were yum. Spent some time in the spa. I think we were in bed by about 10:30, which is very nice, very relaxing way to spend New Year's Eve rather than being in the throngs of the city. Navigating huge crowds of people just to watch the fireworks. So I think I much preferred the way we spent it. But for the first dinner for 2016, I visited the Lake House, which I've never been to. Which is a two-hat restaurant in Daylesford. If you haven't been there, I do highly recommend it. Ella Wolf-Tasker is a fantastic chef, and it's a very, very good wine list as well. Managed to pick out a very good bottle of Burgundy, which we both relished. But 2016, brand new year, hopefully offers some really exciting developments, opportunities. I know that I'm really looking forward to hopefully hitting the 100 episode mark for the Vincast. I'm really excited about some of the ideas that I have for the podcast and ways that I can kind of introduce more interactivity and hopefully maybe even run some events with the Vincast. But I will let you know more about that as episode 100 approaches. Also hopeful, fingers crossed, that I might be able to actually buy some of my own grapes to make some wine for myself, just to try it out, which is kind of scary. It's very exciting. Always open to suggestions. I think ideally I'd like to buy some Italian grape varieties, which, as you probably might know, very close to my heart. I'm very much in love with Italian grape varieties in Australia, so I'll see what happens there, and hopefully I'll be able to chronicle the activities around that and hopefully share them with you. But what I wanted to talk about on this video is, whilst I've been away, it's actually really great to kind of get out of town and have some downtime to clear the mind, I guess, and gives you an opportunity to do certain things, including reading a book which I was actually sent by the author and who will be on the podcast, I hope, very soon. It's a book called The Wine Hunter, and it's written by Campbell Mattinson, who, if you are not familiar with him, is probably one of the absolute best wine writers in Australia, has written several books, does contribute to the Wine Front, which is arguably Australia's foremost independent authority on Australian wine and other wines as well, with very, very regular reviews and ratings for wines. Campbell has worked very closely with people like James Halliday. He has written for wine publications as well, and he has basically put together, it's actually back in 2007, that the book, the original, come on, no? Okay. Back in 2007, the original edition of The Wine Hunter came out, in 2015, so just this past year, was reprinted with a hardcover, which is what Campbell actually sent me, which I was very, very grateful and humbled to be offered this book to read, and I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to read it now, because it's about a guy by the name of Maurice O'Shea, who is considered to be the original great winemaker of Australia between the 1920s and 1950s in the Hunter Valley. Maurice O'Shea bought the Mount Pleasant vineyard, which had been planted in the 1880s, I think, which then eventually he sold to McWilliams and has been owned by them since, but he was retained there as the winemaker and estate director and that kind of thing, if that such a thing existed back then, right up until he died in 1958, 56, 55, 54. Hold on. 1956, Melbourne Olympics. So I love the book. I started reading it a little while ago and have basically read most of it in the last day and a half. And it's a fascinating story. It says on the cover, the life story. I will point out that it is, to a certain extent, it's a story, and that's something that was great. As I was reading through the book, I found it kind of interesting. I wondered how Campbell, I guess, and with his research, if he had other people researching as well, how he'd actually kind of got such an insight into all these amazing moments, these significant moments in Morris's life, and to know what was conversed, what Morris might have been thinking, because it went into some pretty quite a bit of detail. And he says at the back, as a what do they call it, an epilogue, I guess, afterwards, that he had to embellish, he had to kind of tell a bit more of a story, which actually brought a lot more life, I think, to the book. It was fascinating. One of the things that it's been making me feel is how much of a struggle it must have been, particularly back then. Morris was actually in France during the First World War, and just narrowly managed to avoid, I think, having to serve. And then, obviously in the 1920s, there was always a struggle, because that was when he first started making the wines at Mount Pleasant. 1930s, of course, Great Depression. Then, the 1940s, World War II. But irrespective of all that sort of stuff, it wouldn't have made a huge amount of difference, because the wine market in Australia wasn't really for dry table wines. They were much more for fortified wines. So to kind of think about that struggle and someone's resilience to continue to work at making the best possible wines they could, wines that to a certain extent nobody really wanted, it's pretty astonishing. But it also kind of makes me think about what someone could do now as far as creating a legend in the wine industry, to a certain extent in Australia, but I guess sort of anywhere. What kind of opportunities are there? What undiscovered things can there be that could allow someone the opportunity to, I guess, poke their head above the crowd? The amazing thing about the wine industry being as large as it is today, and the wine community being so big, with a lot of winemakers and viticulturists, merchants, wine communicators, and wine consumers, very savvy wine consumers. Not to mention the ease of communication that we have now, and the ease of which you can actually get information. There's so much great wine, but there's less opportunity to make a singular wine as Maurice O'Shea was making back in the 20s and to the 50s. How does someone, become, completely revolutionised? Because essentially that's sort of what he did, without him necessarily, in the same way that I guess Vincent van Gogh never really kind of got to appreciate, wasn't alive when his art was appreciated. Maurice O'Shea, even though he had some kind of celebrity as it existed back then for wine, never lived to see his wines truly stand the test of time and show how amazing he actually was. To actually, he was never alive when dry wines, table wines, were de rigueur as they are now. You know, fortified wines are very, very slowly kind of dying away. People aren't drinking fortified wines. Back then, people mostly drank them. So it's interesting. I do wonder how someone can make a mark, I guess, and it makes me think about, I guess, what I'm doing and whether or not I can make a mark, whether or not I want to, whether I'm just content to continue doing what I do and talking about wines and talking about, you know, wine stories, I guess. It's a really fascinating book. I do like the way it's structured. It's broken down into fairly reasonably short chapters, focusing on certain elements. It really does make you appreciate what you have, I guess, as far as wine, but appreciate the simple things as far as food as well. One of the things that Morris apparently was a great lover of was food. But when he talks about the kind of food that he cooked, it sounds like, you know, they're not exceedingly complicated dishes. It just, you know, appreciating the quality of the source material, like what you're actually making a dish with. And I hope that as far as dining trends, you know, speaking personally as someone who does enjoy eating in restaurants, that the trend does kind of move back towards simplifying things, because I have a similar, I think it's not restricted to food and wine, but in most things I think that there is great beauty in simplicity, and most of the time wines that I enjoy, food that I enjoy, art, music, all these kind of cultural things, the more simple they are, the less, I guess, ingredients and the less process involved with it, the more I enjoy it. Maybe I appreciate seeing the purity, and, you know, the less things you can sort of hide behind, if that makes sense. And clearly that sort of showed in what Morris was doing. He was, you know, I think Campbell points out, and it's hard to disagree with it, that he was so incredibly ahead of his time. I think one thing probably Campbell, as someone who appreciates the kind of wines that Morris was making, points out how Morris was making wines without really any of the kind of things we take for granted now as far as technology, like temperature control, like a lot of commercial yeasts or filtering fine and that kind of thing. He was making these incredible wines that also had the potential to live a long time. Where, you know, you look at a lot of the kind of wines that are gathering a lot of attention now all over the world, but certainly in Australia, are these sort of these low impact wines that are using these kind of techniques. It really does show you how Morris influenced the modern wine industry, but it then kind of evolved beyond that, and now it's coming back more towards the way that he was making his wines. He was making his wines because those were the tools that he had at the time. Whereas it's almost like a lot of wine is being made with all these tools just because they can, just because they're there. Whereas I think what's interesting now is, with a lot of emerging and more dynamic winemakers, in my opinion, doing is actually having less influence on the wines themselves, and they're possibly thinking more about the actual source material of the vineyards and the grapes that they're producing. But I am really looking forward to having Campbell on the podcast at some point. Of course, I will be publicising that. I wanted to thank him for writing such a fantastic book, and for actually sending me a copy to give me the opportunity to read this. I do recommend seeking it out. You can probably get in touch with Campbell, campbellmattinson.com, and you'll be able to buy it from him or from a good bookstore. But thanks guys for watching this video. My first video book review, I guess. Maybe I'll do some more, I'm not sure. If you'd like to suggest a good wine book for me to read, and if you'd like to hear my thoughts, please get in contact with me. You can make a suggestion in the comments. Please like this video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the Intrepid Wino channel. Come and visit me at intrepidwino.com. Go and visit campbellmattinson.com. Until next time, happy reading.